Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you my top buy low and sell high candidates heading into week 6 of the 2021 fantasy football season. A couple things to note before we get into that though. First of all, please make sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more fantasy football content. Second of all, I am recording this on October 13th, 2021. So if things change in the news, that could affect, this list. So if I say to buy low on a player and they suffer a catastrophic injury, obviously the outlook will change for them and you probably don't want to buy low on them. And then another quick thing I want to do before we get into this week 6 video is I want to quickly recap some of the players that we made some good calls on over the first few weeks of the season, because I think it's kind of nice to look back and see what we've been doing well here at the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. So just really quickly, I'm just going to rapid fire week 1 after week 1. So following week 1, heading into week 2, the Green Bay Packers are coming off a horrible game. I said to buy low on Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Mike Evans of the Packers, and I would say that has been a successful call. Obviously, this all depends on what you paid for them, but they had horrible week 1s, and they've been really solid to great since then. Ezekiel Elliott had a rough week 1 against Tampa Bay, like most running backs do. I said to buy low on him. He's been a stud. Antonio Gibson, he didn't have the best week 1, but he's been solid since then as well. And then I also said to buy low on Najee Harris, he didn't have the best week 1 either, but since then he's been very involved, especially in PPR, seeing a ton of receptions. So those were some good calls there. Mike Evans is another wide receiver who had a rough week 1. I said to buy low on him, and he has been great since then. And this is a reminder for future years, guys. After week 1, a lot of people make predetermined, like they put so much stock into week 1 and they forget their whole careers, right? So a lot of these players have been really good players their whole careers, and they had a rough week 1, and maybe you were able to get them on the cheap. So that's one thing to just remember moving forward for the years to come. In terms of sells after that week, I said to sell high on Mark Ingram and Tyson Williams, who were very relevant that week. Since then, they really haven't done anything. Tyson Williams isn't even playing, really. Mark Ingram isn't doing much either. Christian Kirk, I said to sell high on after a big week 1. That was a good call. And then Robbie Anderson, his targets, he didn't see a lot of targets week 1. He had a long touchdown, though. I said to sell high on him, and he really hasn't done anything since then. So those were some good calls. Other than that, I have a few more calls I want to shout out. Joe Mixon and David Montgomery had some down weeks. I believe it was after week 2 heading into week 3. Joe Mixon and Montgomery have recently been dealing with injuries, but without that, it was looking like they were kind of, elevating their play and looking like they were going to be pretty solid. So once they're both healthy, I think those could end up being some good calls. Mark Andrews after week 2, he had a slow start to the season. I said to buy low on him, and since then he has been very solid. He had like a 100-yard game, a 60-something yard game, and then recently on week 5 Monday Night Football, he had like 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards, 2-point conversions, I think, too. So he's been crazy good. And then finally, just to recap a couple more recent ones, I said to buy low on Antonio Brown heading into week 5. He was coming off a game where he missed, and he had a pretty down performance. And then against the Patriots, he had an okay performance, but I really liked that connection with Tom Brady, and the targets were there. And what did he do in week 5? He came out and had an explosive, huge game. So that was a really, really good call. And then I also said to sell high on Sam Darnold. I'm not going to say that was necessarily a great call, just because, we still have a whole season left. I think he still will be relevant, but he did really come back down to earth in week 5 and did not really see that type of crazy production that he had been seeing. So I just really quickly wanted to recap some of the better calls that we've made so far. And with that being said, I think we are ready to now get into the buy low and sell high candidates heading into week 6. And I'm going to start with my buy lows. All right, so the first player that's going to be on our buy low list, a player that I just mentioned in that previous segment that I talked about who has been dealing with an injury, it's going to be Joe Mixon, running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's been really, really good all year, especially week 1. He had that great volume, and he's had really good volume all season long, which is why I think when you can buy a workhorse running back on the cheap, you should always try to do it. But week 5, things were a little bit different. He only saw 10 carries. He luckily got a touchdown, so he saved a lot of people that played him, but he only saw 1 target, caught it for 2 yards. But the most important number of all of these figures that you're seeing on the screen right here is right here. 28% of snaps on offense, only 19 offensive snaps. That is a direct result of his injury. He was active, but he clearly wasn't 100%. Samaje Perine, their backup running back, was very involved in the offense. So I think this was just a case where even though he was active, he just wasn't that workhorse back that he normally is when he is 100%. Now, Samaje Perine is not going to be playing coming up here. I believe he's on the COVID list, but either way, he's not going to be playing. So as soon as week 6, Joe Mixon might have to see that snap percentage go all the way back up. He's further recovered from the injury, and they don't have Samaje Perine, their backup running back. So they're going to have to give him the ball at least a little bit more. And regardless, even if it's not this week, moving forward, I expect him to regain that heavy workload that he normally sees. And speaking of this upcoming week, he gets the Detroit Lions. So he doesn't even need to see a huge workload to succeed there. That's a great matchup. He also gets matchups against the Baltimore Ravens and the New York Jets. Looking at this little chart of fantasy points allowed, he's playing the Lions right here. They're apparently giving up the most. The Jets are right here giving up the third most. And then the Ravens are right here. So they're up there as well. So to me, if there's a manager in your league who doesn't understand the context of why Joe Mixon didn't perform well in week 5, and maybe he or she is a little bit worried, this is a great chance to send out an offer, see if you can get Joe Mixon on the cheap. Obviously, it depends what you have to pay to get this player, but if you can get him for a cheaper price than what he's worth, I think that is definitely something that in the long run will work out, and possibly as soon as this week against Detroit in a great matchup. All right, I'm going to spend a little bit less time on this player. I talked a lot about Joe Mixon because there was a lot of context. He got injuries, backups, snap percentage, all that stuff. With Javonte Williams, running back for the Denver Broncos, it just comes down to this. He is splitting the workload with Melvin Gordon, who is a veteran running back who has had a very great career, and he still has some stuff left in the tank. So Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon in Denver have been splitting work. To me, Javonte Williams, he hasn't really been doing anything too crazy. So to me, this is a player where if you can buy him for his current value, I think that is something that you should do, because if you buy him for his value and he continues to meet that value, then it's a pretty neutral trade. It's really not that consequential. But if this rookie running back over the course of the season, if we see that workload ramp up and Melvin Gordon's go down, then that's where you become the winner of that trade. And Javonte Williams could see that happen, because we've seen in the past a lot of times with rookies, we see their workload go up over the course of the season. So if that does happen, this could be a win trade for you if you can get him, for a pretty low end running back price tag. But even if that doesn't happen, it could just end up being a pretty neutral trade for you. But it's pretty much just a neutral trade with some upside. And once again, now that we're going to move on to the wide receivers, we have a familiar face on this list, and that's going to be Stefon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills, wide receiver. I don't know what to say, guys. I mean, he is one of the better wide receivers in the league. He just hasn't really had that electric big game yet. As you can see, he's been around like 60-ish yards every game, except for against Houston. He was 7 for 114. He only has 1 touchdown on the year. I just frankly expect the production to come. If you don't believe that, then maybe don't buy low on Stefon Diggs. But he's too good of a player in too good of an offense to not eventually see more production. And this is all about the cost that you can get him for. So if you have to pay up as if he's like the number 1 overall wide receiver, then I would say that's a bad trade. But if you can get him for more as like a high-end wide receiver too, if you can pay that price tag for him, then that's a trade that I would immediately make as soon as possible, especially when you look at his upcoming matchups. He gets the Tennessee Titans, the Miami Dolphins, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those are some juicy matchups right there. Tennessee Titans are currently giving up the most points. Miami Dolphins are right there, also up high. And then what was the other team? We got the Jacksonville Jags. Where are they at? Jacksonville is right here, sort of middle of the pack, but that is definitely an exploitable matchup. That doesn't scare me at all. So just because of the talent, the offense, and his matchup coming up, I think that this is a player that you should look into buying low on. And then my final buy low wide receiver is going to be A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans. And like I said about a lot of other players, this all comes down to the cost that you can acquire this player for. He's been dealing with injuries lately. Julio Jones is going to be returning from injury as well eventually. And so that's going to be another target in the offense. And this is really the Derrick Henry show on the ground at the running back position. So there are some red flags with A.J. Brown, but we've seen him produce for fantasy in the past. So ultimately, to me, this is just a matter of if he can become healthy, I think he will eventually produce more than he currently is. It's not the safest trade to make, but again, it all comes down to the price that you have to pay for this player. So if you can get him for a really, really low price, then that's obviously a good trade. But if you have to pay up as if he's, this locked in wide receiver one every week, then I would hold off. But, I think it's worth sending out an offer to the AJ Brown manager, who's probably frustrated with their selection of Brown, and just seeing, what the cost is to get him, because you might be surprised and it might be a good move for your team. All right, so those were really the only buys that I have on this list, but I do have quite a few sell highs. So this section is going to be very important. I have a lot of running backs in particular, and we're going to start with Myles Gaskin of the Miami Dolphins. He is a sell high for me. Last week, I made him a sit, and against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, just a brutal matchup, coming off a game where he saw 2 carries for 3 yards, no targets, no receptions, only played 12 snaps, which was 23% of their offensive snaps. And what does he do? He comes out, he sees 5 for 25 on the ground, but 10 receptions on 10 targets, 74 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. To me, to anyone with common sense, that is not sustainable. Even if he continues to be involved in the air, receiving touchdowns are very, very hard to predict, especially for running backs. They're not a very sticky stat. And there are definitely red flags with Gaskin. This offense isn't great. We've seen his workload be really, really low. And I mean, moving forward, who knows? Maybe he will be this flex option, but I would definitely sell high. If you can sell him for, let's say, wide running back 2 or even flex value, I think you should definitely look into doing that, because I don't think he's going to get 2 receiving touchdowns most weeks. It is interesting to see these 10 targets. I'm not sure why that just came out of nowhere like that. He does get a couple good matchups here, so you could wait and see, if he has a couple more good games, maybe you sell high on him before that matchup against Buffalo, which is a little bit tougher. But yeah, he has a lot of red flags, so if someone is willing to overpay for him, that is definitely a good move for your team. Our next sell high at the running back position is going to be Damien Williams of the Chicago Bears. I already had him in our Dynasty League before David Montgomery, the starting running back of the Bears, went on injured reserve. David Montgomery will be coming back as long as there's no complications with the injury or anything, and he will eventually overtake that role. But Damien Williams is the starter for the near future. As I was saying, I had Damien in a Dynasty League, and I traded him to the Montgomery manager for a 3rd round rookie pick. The team that I traded him to he's probably one of the worst teams in the league, so that is going to be a low 3rd round pick. So that is a little dynasty context for what I traded him for. But in redraft, to me, he's someone that it depends on your team situation. If this is someone that you need to start for your team, then it's going to be kind of hard to let him go. But if you got him off the waiver wire or something and you have the depth to not start him, I would look for a running back needy team and try to send him his way. It kind of depends what kind of trade you want to make. Maybe you want to do Damien Williams plus something for an improvement at another position, or it really just depends. Or maybe just a 1-for-1 trade. Damien Williams, a part-time starter, for maybe a wide receiver who's going to be a part of your lineup for the rest of the season, barring injury. So I think while he plays, he'll be productive. He was 16 for 64 on the ground, got in the end zone, saw a few targets. He gets Green Bay, then a rough matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and San Francisco. But yeah, Damien Williams is not going to be the starter for the rest of the season as long as Montgomery comes back and stays healthy. So if you can sell this part-time player, if you don't need him in the near future, if you can sell him for someone that you can use long-term, I think that would be a nice little move for your team. Another sell high running back is going to be Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns. Kareem Hunt is a extremely good player, but in my opinion, he's just overproducing a little bit. He's splitting work with Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns, so they're both very involved. You can see his snap percentage right here. So he's seeing about half the snaps. He's just frankly, he's getting a decent amount of carries, and actually quite a handful of catches each week. So he is quite involved in this offense. But to me, if you look at his touchdowns, 1-0, 1-1-2, I think eventually we could see that kind of go down a little bit. So he's currently in half PPR, the running back 4 overall, ahead of guys like Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, even Nick Chubb, his own teammate, Alvin Kamara. So if you can sell Kareem Hunt as if he is the 4th best running back in fantasy, or even as an RB1. He could finish as an RB1 by the end of the season just because of the hot start he's had. And it also comes down to what you think about the other players that you'd be including in that trade package and all that. But to me, I just think he's overproducing a little bit. And if you can sell him high right now for someone who's more of a locked and loaded every week running back one. I think that could be a good move long term. But yeah, Kareem Hunt is definitely not a must sell. So don't sell him just for pennies, because he is going to be a contributor for the rest of the season. But if someone is willing to overpay for this player, then I would make that move. And speaking of overperforming, I'm going to talk about James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals, who is another sell high running back. He's seen a decent amount of work, but we know from his past he is injury prone, and a lot of his production lately has come on getting in the end zone, which, let's be honest, getting in the end zone is a nice thing for your running back to do. And the last 3 games, he's scored 2 and 1 total touchdowns. So his production has been great lately. I just don't expect that to continue. If you take away, obviously you can't just take away the touchdowns, because he will score touchdowns. He is their goal line back, and the Cardinals offense is good most weeks. So I expect him to still have good games, but he's just overproducing. I think we'll just see those touchdowns come down eventually. And it just comes down to consistency. I don't think he'll be the most consistent player. He's certainly someone that's worthy of being rostered and flexed on a lot of teams, as a matter of fact. So again, kind of like Kareem Hunt, I would obviously prefer over James Conner, but in that same sense, I wouldn't get rid of James Conner for nothing. But if someone views him, if they're just looking at the box score and they see the points and they're saying, okay, this is a guy who every week is going to be, he's going to fill my running back 2 spot and I'm just going to set it and forget it, then I would try to trade James Conner to that manager for maybe a more secure, maybe even a wide receiver, because you got James Conner late in drafts or maybe off the waiver wire. So maybe if you need some wide receiver help, you could try to trade him away for a more locked and loaded wide receiver, or perhaps a running back, or maybe you package him with sort of another tight end to upgrade that position. Something like that I could see making sense for a lot of teams out there. All right, guys. Last week I had Cordarrelle Patterson as a sell high, and he's going to make this list yet again, even though he once again had a really relevant week for fantasy. He's been nothing but amazing this year, and I expect him to continue to at least be quite good for fantasy. This, again, kind of like a lot of players on the sell high list, it's called selling high, right? So you need to get good value in return. But if you take a look at the highest scoring running backs on the season, this is half PPR. One of these names is not like the other. Okay, we got Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt, Najee Harris, Cordarrelle Patterson. He's ahead of guys like Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Kamara, James Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Antonio Gibson, Joe Mixon. He's been amazing, right? So again, I would prefer Patterson over a lot of running backs out there, but to me, he's not a running back 1. He's more of, he's more of like a kind of low mid running back 2, I would say. But I do think he will continue to be quite relevant. I mean, you could even make the case that he's a locked and loaded running back 2, but I hope it's going to come down to how much he continues to be involved, and he will continue to be involved, I predict. But yeah, I just think he's overproducing a little bit. I don't think he's going to be a running back 1 the rest of the way. Maybe he will. I could be wrong. He's proven me wrong so far. He's proven a lot of people wrong, but this is a player that was not drafted in most leagues unless you're in the deepest of leagues. I'm in a dynasty team with 30-man rosters, and he wasn't even rostered before the season. So that just kind of goes to show how much he's exceeding expectations. So I think Cordarrelle Patterson is the perfect trade high candidate. He is going into a bye week, I believe, so that might nerf his value a little bit. So maybe you want to wait a little bit until he plays Miami and then sell him high before tough matchups against the Carolina Panthers and the Saints. That could be a nice move as well. But I think if you can sell Patterson straight up for a locked-in running back 1, that's a great move to make, especially because this is a guy you got late in drafts or went undrafted. So he was already someone you weren't depending on. So if you can sell him high for someone that's more secure and has more locked-in season-long value, that would be a solid move. I must say, though, Cordarrelle Patterson, since his days with the Vikings, I am a Vikings fan. I've been saying for years that people need to figure out a way to use Patterson. We see him in the kick return game be so electric, and I just feel like teams never really found a way to get the ball in his hands. And the Falcons, they're getting the ball in his hands. Last week he saw 9 targets, caught 7 of them for 60, had 14 carries for 54 yards. So, I mean, he is a very, very great player. So I'm hesitant to say to sell high on him, right? Because I don't want people to get rid of him for nothing. So I want to be very clear. This is a player who I like for fantasy, but I think we're seeing his peak value right now. He's had a 3 touchdown game in there, and I just think his hype is at an all-time high. So if you can get rid of him and have someone just drastically overpay, right, then that is what I would do. Okay, I just have to clarify that with Patterson, because I don't want anyone to say that he hasn't been great, that I think he hasn't been great, because he's been fantastic and he could be fantastic moving forward. But we're going to talk about another player on the same team, the Atlanta Falcons, who had a fantastic week 5 as well. That's going to be Kyle Pitts, tight end for the Falcons. This is our final sell high player. He has been solid all year. He just never got in the end zone. He's had some ups and downs. At the tight end position, it's a weak position. He's had a handful of targets or a handful of receptions each week. His high of yards was 73. But in week 5, he had a great matchup against the Jets. The Falcons were without Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage at the wide receiver position. So heading into this game, I made a start him, sit him video, and I said, hey, Kyle Pitts is a start him. You have to play him. And he went out there. He caught 9 of 10 targets for 119 yards and 1 touchdown. So moving forward, I expect Kyle Pitts to be a tight end 1. That's a combination of me thinking he's a good player, combined with the fact that tight end is a weak position, right? So I like Kyle Pitts moving forward, but he has a lot of hype around his name, and he had his best game of the season. He's coming off his best game of the season against a horrible defense in the New York Jets, in a game where 2 of their top options, more so Calvin Ridley, but also Russell Gage, were not playing, right? So I could see him being really solid moving forward. Like I said, I expect him to be a tight end 1 for the rest of the season. But if you can package Kyle Pitts with something kind of, mid to low value for a more secure tight end 1, I think that could be a good move. You could also trade away Kyle Pitts for maybe a more under the radar kind of sleeper tight end. Just some names that come to mind would be like Dalton Schultz or Dawson Knox. Not that I like those players as much, but if you can get one of those guys in return, plus another, kind of player like a wide receiver or something, or a running back that you could put in your starting lineup or use in a bye week, something like that, then maybe that's a trade you look into. But Kyle Pitts is by no means a must sell. Kind of like a lot of players on this list, it's just something where if someone is willing to overpay, then I would make that transaction. Those are all the players that I have on my buy low and sell high list heading into week 6. Again, I want to stress the importance of the price mattering. So if someone's a buy low, that means you're buying low, right? You're not overpaying. If someone is a sell high, that doesn't mean you sell, you get rid of Cordarrelle Patterson for, I don't know, Jamison Crowder or something. Like, you wouldn't do that, because, Jamison Crowder is valuable, but Patterson is just this, he's just a next level right now. So I would need something more out of that deal to make that transaction. So not a must trade. The player that's closest to a must trade that we talked about, would probably be Myles Gaskin, just because he makes me nervous. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. If people are just looking at the box score and you can sell just that number, then that would be a good move. And then other than that, probably Damien Williams, just because his time as a starter will only last, a few more weeks here. So, and I think he'll be relevant. But once that time is over, Montgomery should come back, and if he stays healthy, Williams will be relegated to a backup role. So if you don't need Damien Williams, that's a player that I would definitely encourage you guys to sell. But a lot of those other guys, there are a lot of players that I would say to only trade away if you're getting crazy value in return. But yeah, that's the whole list. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful. Once again, please make sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel for more fantasy football content, and good luck in the upcoming week. And I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.